about kind of how that got started. And as I go along, I've got some things to show you. Well, let's just get along. First of all, the beginning of the Harry Potter lexicon actually started quite a long time ago, when I was a kid. Ever since I was a kid, now I'm a little older than I look, I used to be a massive Star Trek fan, as Steve here will tell you. Huge Star Trek fan. I mean, I was watching Star Trek when it was really on TV, okay? Huge Star Trek fan. And Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and all these kinds of things. I was just a massive fan of all this stuff. What it was is that something about these detailed, imaginative worlds just captivated me. I just loved them. I loved the detail and the in-depth stuff. And one of them was Hogan's Heroes, which people laughed and think, how in the world would you be a fan of Hogan's Heroes? But if you look, this was actually, there were no computers, okay? So this is hand-drawn, and then I stuck it into the typewriter and typed the words, okay? So this is how dedicated that I was when I was, I don't know how old. But anyway, you know, some pretty intense stuff. And this is, we're talking about this richly imagined, how many of you, okay, you guys are done. How many of you have actually ever seen Hogan's Heroes? Oh, okay, that's a good thing. That's not bad. Another one was, I created a Star Trek fanzine. Okay, fanzines were before the internet. People used to print things on paper, and you hand them out to people. And so I had my own little fanzine that I had. And then I wrote a book, this is in the 1980s, called The Complete Encyclopedia of Star Trek: The Next Generation. This book right here, you can see, it's thick. It was typed on a Commodore 64. All right? Beautiful thing here. I spent weeks, ages on this thing. Okay, this is a beautiful book. It won an award. Okay? The Complete Encyclopedia of Star Trek. This is probably what you might call the lexicon phase 1. Because this is a complete guide to, this is only after one season of the show. And this is before video, okay? So I had to watch it and, you know, write stuff down real fast. We used to actually take our camera and take pictures of the screen, okay? Now, interesting thing about this is a massive project. I love doing it, this catalog of all the stuff in this Star Trek world. And I think there were about 40 copies printed. I have to just do this because, what's this? Person from Michigan showing you where they live. I live right here, and I published this book, and the amount of influence that I had was about like that. Okay? Fandom back then, this is pre-internet, and so we didn't know very many people. It's funny because a couple of people in there were in that group with me, but we knew a few people in Lansing as well. So there was Lansing and there was here, but that was about it. Okay, so this is, I think, 40 copies of the book. All 40 copies are either in the trash or within about 150 miles of me right now, laying in somebody's basement or something like this. That book that I put all that time and effort in, that I just put my heart and soul into, I've got one, that's it. Okay? That's what you have back then when I was doing this sort of work. Okay? What happened was that when it gets to the year 1998, something very interesting happened. I was a librarian at that point. And somebody said, did you read? Well, that's interesting. See, now I'm getting fooled by my technology. So they said, did you read this thing called, this Potter book? And I said, yeah, I did. Because there was a book came out at the same time called Harvey Potter's Balloon Farm. And this book came out, and it's actually a pretty good book. It's a little children's, you know, it's an illustrated book. And yeah, I read it. It was fine. And, you know, couldn't quite figure out what the big deal was. But yeah, it was a good book and everything. And then, yeah, I kept having all these people say, oh, you've got to read this book. Okay, and then I realized, of course, they were actually talking about this one. And eventually I did get around to reading this one. You know, but if you're a librarian, you've got, you know, books you've got to read, stacks. So I eventually got around to reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I had a crisis. Because I read this book, and I wasn't very far in before I realized that I was in some pretty serious danger. Because I know what happens when I start reading books like this. Because I start writing things down, taking notes, and scribbling in the margins. See, I had a professor at Calvin College named George Harper, who was a literature professor. And he used this book here, The Daughter of Time, in one of my literature classes. How many of you read it? Okay, everyone else, you need to go home and read this book now. This goes to the top of your pile. Okay? What I learned from George Harper, though, was not just that this was a good book. Kind of popular. But what I learned was that you can actually dig deep into a book like this. You can find things that you don't find when you just read the book. And what I did is I started to learn from watching him. Well, and the reason was he actually gave me his copy of the book after the class. And I have this paperback book, and he's got underlines and little notes all in the margins. And I discovered a really cool way to enjoy literature. And I loved doing that. So I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And I thought, okay, I have no problem. Because I know what's going to happen. All these cool magic spells and books and stuff like this, it's going to get into my brain. It's going to annoy my wife. I'm not going to do this. So, not a problem, of course, because I got wind of the next book, which is called Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and what I concurred, it had a flying car in it. And you see, a flying car did not fit my picture of the world from book one, and I thought, great, no problem. I will not have a problem at all, because I would like book two. Well, then I got book two, and you got to realize that it came out about half a year before it came out here in the States. It came out in Britain. So, but I'm actually going to read you. Wrong one. Sorry. I'm going to read to you a little bit of this.